Everything you think you know about why ants carry their dead is wrong. It isn't grief. It isn't mourning. It's a chemical reflex so cold that once you understand it, you'll never watch a column of ants the same way again. When an ant dies inside the colony, the workers do not stop to pay respects. They do not form a funeral procession. They grab the body by the mandibles and drag it out, often within minutes, sometimes before the carcass has fully stopped twitching. To a human eye, this looks efficient, almost practical. But the real story begins long before the ant stops moving. A living ant is coated in a blend of hydrocarbons that acts as a chemical passport. Every member of the colony carries this signature, a waxy fingerprint that says, "I belong here." As long as that passport is intact, the ant is treated as a nestmate. It is fed, groomed, defended. The moment that chemical profile changes, everything flips. Death is not an event for an ant colony. It is a chemical transition. When an ant dies, its body begins to break down, and one of the compounds released in abundance is a fatty acid called oleic acid. You know it as a component of olive oil. To an ant, it is a signal of something to be removed. This is where the assumption cracks open. A single molecule, not a moment of loss, is what triggers the response. If that shift in how you see the insect world feels unsettling, then you already know why this channel exists. Subscribe, because every behavior we think we understand hides a chemical story waiting to be uncovered. And right now, drop the word oleic in the comments if the idea of a funeral being a cleaning protocol caught you off guard. In the 1970s, the biologist Edward O. Wilson demonstrated this with a simple experiment. He painted a living ant with a small amount of oleic acid. The workers immediately treated the living ant as if it were dead. They grabbed it, dragged it to the colony's waste pile, and left it there. The ant, still alive, cleaned itself off and returned to the nest. The message was unmistakable. The signal alone was enough to trigger the removal behavior. The actual state of the ant was irrelevant. This is not a funeral. It is a cleaning protocol. Ant colonies are densely packed societies with thousands of individuals living in tight tunnels and chambers under the ground. In such conditions, a single corpse can become a breeding ground for bacteria, fungi, and pathogens that could tear through the entire population. Removing the dead is not a courtesy. It is social immunity, a hygienic reflex that every colony depends on to survive. The behavior is called necrophoresis, from the Greek words for corpse and to carry. It is not unique to ants. Bees, termites, and some wasps show the same pattern, but ants have perfected it into a high-speed, almost mechanical routine. A dead ant is typically carried out within the first half hour. In some species, specialized workers called Undertakers never do anything else. Their entire existence is spent hauling bodies to the graveyard. There is an even stranger layer beneath this. The colony does not just discard the dead, it also recycles them. In certain species, the carcass is brought to a designated refuse area where nutrients can be broken down and reabsorbed. Foraging workers may carry pieces of dead nestmates back into the nest as food. This sounds macabre to us, but for a colony operating on razor-thin energy margins, waste is an expense that evolution could not afford. But here is the part that disturbs the assumption most. The same chemical signal that triggers removal can also trigger aggression if the death smell appears on the wrong individual. When a foreign ant enters the colony coated in its own hydrocarbon profile, it is attacked. But if that foreign ant somehow carries a death cue, the workers treat it not as an invader, but as trash. They will carry it out without hostility. The identity of the ant is irrelevant. Only the chemical label matters. This is the hard truth that the mourning narrative cannot absorb. An ant colony has no concept of death as loss. It has only a set of chemical detectors that trigger specific motor programs. When a worker encounters a dead nestmate, it does not feel sorrow. It does not recognize that the ant is gone. It simply detects the presence of oleic acid and executes the removal subroutine. The behavior is as automatic as pulling your hand away from a hot surface. Now you have reached a point where the evidence demands a choice. You can keep projecting emotion onto the insect world, or you can accept that what looks like loyalty may be a reflex written in hydrocarbons. If this kind of dismantling compels you, subscribe, because the deeper you go into animal behavior, the more your assumptions will be set aside one by one. And in the comments, tell me the word that comes to mind when you realize your pet's gratitude might be just as mechanical. In 2021, a study published in Current Biology reinforced this view with experimental evidence. Researchers manipulated the chemical profiles of dead ants and observed that the removal behavior was strictly tied to the presence of death-specific compounds. No death cue meant no removal. No chemical shift meant the corpse was ignored, even when it had been dead for hours. The ants were not responding to the fact of death. They were responding to a molecule. Think about how different this is from the story we tell ourselves. We watch ants carrying their dead and project our own rituals onto them. We imagine a silent procession, a moment of recognition, a farewell. But the ant dragging a body to the midden is not saying goodbye. It is cleaning the nest, like you would wipe a countertop. This matters more than you might admit, because if you have ever felt a pang of sympathy watching an ant labor under the weight of a dead companion, you were not watching a funeral. You were watching evolution in its most indifferent form. The colony does not mourn. It sterilizes. It sanitizes. It does whatever is necessary for the collective to keep running, and it does so without a single conscious thought about the individual that was lost. The implication is uncomfortable. Every behavior that looks like emotion in the insect world may be nothing more than chemical stimulus and motor reflex. A bee tending to a wounded sister is not showing compassion. It is responding to a pheromone that smells like injury. A termite stacking a dead nestmate into the wall of the mound is not building a tomb. It is following a script written by natural selection over hundreds of millions of years. And yet, there is a second layer that even the chemical explanation cannot fully resolve. Because ants do not always treat their dead as trash. In some species, dead ants are buried in shallow graves within the nest. In others, they are covered with soil or debris. The difference depends on the colony's state, the season, and the species. When food is abundant and disease risk is low, some colonies delay removal. When the colony is stressed, they accelerate it. This variation suggests that the chemical signal does not operate in a vacuum. It interacts with the colony's internal context. The same molecule that triggers removal can be overridden by environmental cues. Necrophoresis is not a fixed sequence. It is a flexible response calibrated to the colony's needs. And that flexibility is where the mystery deepens. The question no one can fully answer yet is this: is there anything happening between the detection of the chemical and the motor command? Is there any internal state, any flicker of something that resembles an ant's version of recognition? The current evidence says no, but the current evidence is incomplete. In the 1999 study by Cho and colleagues, published in the Journal of Insect Behavior, researchers found that the removal response could be triggered by a single drop of oleic acid on an otherwise healthy ant. The ant did not resist. It did not signal that it was alive. The workers simply read the chemical and acted. There was no negotiation, no hesitation, no sign that the removal was weighted against any other possibility. But in a 2014 study by Sun, Zhou, and Xia, published in Insect Socio, the same researchers observed that the removal rate varied depending on whether the colony had recently been exposed to pathogens. Colonies that had faced a disease outbreak removed corpses faster and more aggressively. The behavior was regulated by experience. The colony learned, in some distributed sense, that the cost of delay was higher. This does not mean individual ants think about corpses. It means the colony as a whole adjusts its baseline sensitivity. The threshold for detecting oleic acid drops when the pathogen pressure rises. The system becomes more reactive, and that is where the boundary between instinct and something else begins to blur. That blur is exactly what should keep you from closing the case too soon. The colony adjusts. An adjustment requires a trace of the past. If that possibility intrigues you, subscribe now, because the next session will push deeper into what distributed memory looks like in an insect brain. And before you leave, drop a single word in the comments. The thing you refuse to call instinct in your own pet. The name you give that blur matters more than you think. You have watched ants carry dead bodies without knowing what you were really seeing. The next time you spot a worker dragging a carcass across the pavement, stop and remember this. You are not witnessing grief. You are witnessing a colony reading a chemical code, executing a cleaning subroutine, and adjusting its response based on its collective memory of disease. But here is the loop that stays open. If a colony can adjust its response to death based on past experience, then the behavior is not purely mechanical. Somewhere in the distributed network of thousands of ant brains, there is a record of what happened before, a trace that influences what happens next. What that trace looks like, and whether it deserves a word other than instinct, is still unknown. That question will wait for another session, but the scent of it will follow you home.